Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Rod Massimo with the Massimo Group, and today we have our very special guest, Mr. Mike Gallegos. I'll introduce Mike formally in a second, but for now, here's what you all need to do. Mike has posted some questions, and we're not going to discuss them yet, but there's some questions for you in the chat box in regards to, there you go, some questions for you in the chat box in regards just to think about, some open-minded questions. But what I want you to do for me is, in the question and answer box, that's the question and answer box, the Q&A box below, this is all about leading a brokerage team, leading a brokerage company in these unprecedented times. That's what we're talking about here, leadership. So what I need to know from you is, what city are you calling in from in the Q&A? And from that, how many folks do you lead? So what city are you calling in from? Just write Chicago 7, New York 10, Lubbock 2. Just tell us so we understand the flavor of where you guys are coming from. What city are you calling in from? How many folks do you lead? A lot of folks are leading themselves. Okay, so we have folks, Des Moines, Iowa, Raleigh. Hello, Raleigh. You're right next to me. Philadelphia, Toronto, Southern California, Greenville, fantastic. Houston. Great. So, Mike, so far I see teams of 1 to teams of 20 and beyond. So, perfect. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And that's the way, the reason we're doing this is that's the way we want you to ask questions. Do not use the chat box. Don't use the chat box to ask your questions. Use the question and answer box. Someone has 50 folks, Mike, in DC. That's going to be really interesting. So, so let's get started. Thank you for that. And this is how you ask the questions. We'll commit to you. We'll get to as many questions as we can. We're here for you till 3 o'clock. And if we can go a little beyond that, we can. I got another webinar I need to jump on, but we'll do what we can for you. We got a lot of content, a lot of questions to ask Mike. And so let me share with you a little bit about Mike Gallegos. I've known him for cheese and crackers at least 5 years. Is that right, Mike?
Been a while.
Yeah, been a while. I've had the pleasure of not only getting to know Mike, but actually working alongside Mike. Mike is one of our coaches at the Massimo Group, but he's also one of our lead strategists as well. He and I have done presentations and workshops for companies across North America, including companies such as Chase Bank. He's someone I rely on very highly for more integrated strategic things, and also helps me with running my team. Mike also runs several teams across the United States and brokerage teams, and not just for one firm anymore. So, Mike, do me a favor. Can you introduce yourself to the group, and then we'll get started?
Sure thing. So, first and foremost, I'm a coach with the Massimo Group. I also work with a handful of offices for the SVN company, particularly on the West Coast. And I do some strategic consulting with brokerage clients throughout the country. Locally at home, I'm a managing director with a firm called HFO Investment Real Estate, which is an apartment brokerage company up here in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm also a student of the game, I think more than everything else, where I'm continually looking to advance my skill sets as a leader. And I have coaches that I work with weekly as well. So I'm on both sides of this thing.
Well, thank you, Mike. And so, Mike, let's get started. Before I start asking you questions, and again, everyone, you have access to the Q&A box to ask questions. Before we get started, can you help us with an opening statement and a reflection of right now, what you're seeing, what's going on?
Sure. So I'm going to pull two things out of the PIMCO call yesterday morning. They had their State of the Economic Outlook call. This is global markets. They're talking about this being the deepest but shortest recession on record as far as what they expect. They're doing nowcasting versus forecasting. I want you to write that down because we're going to talk about a couple of things here that are particular to what we're going to do over the next 2, 3, 4 months while we're in the free fall of this, whatever we're going to feel. Lastly, we don't have a playbook on hand for a global pandemic. So I circled that when the presenters and the panelists yesterday talked about it. It was one of the elements that they came back to multiple times. We don't have a playbook for a global pandemic. What we do have is a playbook for leadership that you can look at, and it translates down, it transcribes over to the people that you're leading, and to left and right, people that you're working horizontally alongside your colleagues. So my first question for everybody to kick things off, type these down, write these down. They are copied towards the top of the chat box if you want to reference them. Number one, how are you showing up? Particularly in ways that you might not be aware of. Think blind spots here. How are you showing up every day? Number two, what mindset do you have on display? Not what mindset you walk around and talk about in the car, but on display when things get stressful in the office throughout the day to day and you're hearing the bad news and the client wants to cancel a deal or an escrow extends or something happens that causes you some stress and anxiety. What mindset do you display? Everybody sees that. It's contagious. You are on stage 100% of the time. Door closed in the office, you're on stage. At home, not responding to an email, you're on stage. Doing the right thing, leading up front, checking in with your people every day, making sure they're doing okay, you're on stage. Question number three, what's your purposeful strategy for setting and being the positive example? I pause there for a second. Highlight, underline, circle, asterisk, purposeful strategy. We aren't going to magically pull something out of the pocket in the heat of the moment that enables us to just win. You've got to think about situations and scenarios ahead of time and have a dedicated, purposeful strategy for how you're going to handle those, whether it's a closed deal or it's somebody else acting differently because they're experiencing a lot of stress. Question number four, right now, how strong are your connections? And this has a division between it. Number one, connections with the people that you're leading. And connection number two, with the people that you're working with, alongside your colleagues, left and right. And I'd venture to bet some of you might have some other people that are on the periphery of your deals. Escrow personnel, title personnel, legal, tax counsel, property managers, asset managers, list goes on. But you need to think thoroughly about how strong those connections are. Here's my big point for those first four questions. You cannot create a team on the fly in the moment when the you-know-what hits the fan. You need to think about this stuff in advance. Luckily, there are some prescriptive things that you can put in place, but this should be an eye-opener for us all so we can really pay attention to how important it is to work on leadership and your team connectivity every day. So with that mode, one of the quotes I've seen here locally get floated around a lot. One of our other Massimo Group coaches shared it with us internally. It's Wayne Gretzky. So when he's asked how he managed to lead the league in scoring year after year, Wayne says, a good hockey player plays where the puck is. A great one plays where the puck's going to be. So we need to think about anticipating some things here. So whatever you're feeling in the gut or has surfaced recently that's frustrating, challenging, stressful to deal with, let's think about that, but let's also anticipate a little bit of what's coming down the road for us.
I love it, Mike. Thank you so much for that opening statement. And I was actually writing the 4 questions down and asking myself how I'm doing with my team and if I'm showing up. And certainly the purposeful strategy, let's face it, some of these are really challenging for people. They just are. There's no doubt we got hit hard. Everyone got hit hard. It's now, right, in the Rocky saying, right? Now, how do you get up? How do you move forward? Okay, we all got hit. Now we got to move forward. So let's be more specific then, Mike, if we can. I'm sure a lot of folks on the line around are saying, it sounds really good. I get it. It's touchy-feely, which it is, but it really isn't. You need to have those mindsets. I'm telling you, it works. Let's get some tactics here. How about some proactive tactics that will impact, not only folks' bottom line, which everyone is worried about right now, but also their team. So you have some tactics you can share from there?
You bet. So here's a handful. 6-pack plus a couple extras, granular things that you can put in place this afternoon. Number one, it's time for—
Oh, stop. Folks, I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't have a pen and piece of paper, you're going to miss out. You won't remember this. Write this stuff down because I am. So Mike, go ahead and share it with me.
Got it. So number one, it's time for a state of the office meeting. You got to include everybody. If you did want to kick off the year, if you did want to kick off Q1, good, revisit it. The state of the office meeting tells everybody what your vision is, shares what the plan is. It talks about contingencies. It tells everyone with confident, aggressive, muscular word choice up front that you are leading the ship. So highlight exactly how each department is going to contribute to getting through this. Everybody's playing a role: marketing, advertising, your outsourced talent. If you've got a Fiverr contact who's drawing up marketing slicks for you, get them on the call. State of the office meeting, schedule that right away. Invite everybody to it. Deputize your whole team. Give them a mission. That mission, and this is probably the most important piece of your state of the office meeting, the mission is what's going to have people move forward with conviction. And we want our teams thinking positive things, acknowledging challenges, but not caught up in the negative. Number two, if you've used any kind of ABA, StrengthsFinder assessment, etc., DISC analysis report to get a better understanding of how your people are wired, there are typically two ratios on there. Number one is under normal conditions. Number two is how they behave when they're under stress or pressure. We don't need to think too long about which scenario is in place right now. So we're talking about anticipating in the opening statements. Anticipate how your people are going to behave under pressure. One of the ways that you can get them thinking about how they can bring out their best self, I have them identify 6 personal brand elements. Somebody might be really good at financial analysis. That's a brand element. Somebody might have grown up in the trade area where they work and play. Their family might be there. They might have 3 generations deep. That's a personal brand element. So a brand element plus a direct benefit to the client. So what this means for you, Rod, is that fill in the blank with a direct benefit is going to help your brokers have a reason to talk to clients and future clients in a way that identifies exactly what the client's going to get out of it. And right now, that's what our clients need to hear. Do that, and you've just created an artisan style pitch that's client-centric. Number 3, it's time to redesign your discovery meeting. Time to redesign your pitch. Your pitch probably is on pause. Your discovery meeting right now represents who you are as a company and who you are as a professional. In a time like this, where a lot of people are predictably going to just hold because there's uncertainty and fear in the market, and we get bad news coming out of New York and pandemic this, redesign your discovery meeting to where the puck is going to be. It might be 6 months from now that somebody needs to make a real estate decision. That's cool. Flex the muscles on the financial analysis and show how a different loan might impact the property from a buyer's perspective 2 quarters from now. A million ways you can go with that, but it's time to recalibrate your discovery meeting. It's crucial. Number 4, in order to help make that stick. So you as leaders don't just stand up on the podium and say, okay, everybody, let's change our discovery meeting. Here's how you make it stick so you'll actually change and modify the behavior. Have everybody complete a series of recorded audio and video discovery meeting practice sessions. Deliberate practice is your buzzword. Deliberate practice. I'm recommending what we're doing with our teams is at least 6 sessions spread out a week to 2 weeks apart from each other. You record it. The broker comes in with a pre-prepared set of discovery meeting questions, personal brand elements, and direct benefits. That is totally framed from the client's perspective. And each time you record, you're sharpening up what that broker's working on, by the time they get done with 6 sessions, they should be able to clearly and precisely tell a client, here's a little bit about the company, here's what we're thinking about, here's what we're really good at, and by the way, here's how all those things are going to help you right now. All right, so we've made our way through 4. Number 5, we have to keep our people active. Put a number on it. This is fuel to burn. Okay, you need to burn the numbers so that you keep the fires going. 12 discovery meetings equals graduation. Now you're proposal ready. I'll say that again. 12 discovery meetings is graduation. Now you're proposal ready. 12 proposals is graduation. Now you're ready for a transaction. Lastly, in terms of putting a number on it, I don't think we want to measure 100 really important things. We want to measure a short list of key performance indicators. Think lead measures, lag measures here. You can't boil the ocean. It sounds simple, but it's just never going to get done. So KPIs, your first 5,000 phone calls, the practice. We typically get our newer to business brokers through the first 5,000 and throw them a party, because after that, they're able to handle the toughest objections that come up. Routinely, there's between 15 and 20. At that point in time, they can think on their feet and handle anything thrown their way with at least some kind of ledge, move, and transition into another part of the conversation. By the way, if you're thinking about metrics, 48 weeks a year, give them a couple weeks off for holidays, rounded down, it's 104 dials per week. Everybody can hit 104 dials per week, even while working from home, so that they can create Zoom meetings for discovery conversations. Very doable. Sounds like a good first year for a consistent broker, and it sounds like a good consistent year for a more seasoned broker. Number 6, stay in hot pursuit. As a leader, you have to be writing the curriculum of what your team is going to be working on a couple weeks or a month in advance, while your team's working on this week's material and curriculum. Normally, I'd say you're talking about a quarter in advance, but things are too fluid right now, and they're changing too fast. You have to be condensed, which means extra work for you. This is how I talk about how you're showing up and how you're leading from the front. Rounding this out, Winston Churchill had a war cabinet. Right now it's time for an advisory board. You need to have somewhere between 3 and 6 people that are trusted, proven confidants that you can call your war cabinet to help you maneuver through whatever's going to pop up on your schedule in real life. This is not the time to go things alone. A lone wolf isn't going to last long in this kind of a market. The secondary benefit behind that, and please put a star next to this, you're all going to need a morale check too. You can't pour from an empty cup. So as soon as you get overwhelmed, that's when all that bad body language comes out, and that's how you start showing up the wrong way, and a negative cycle starts to flow. So your words matter. Think about the power and the posture of your dialogue and the body language behind it that you give to your team. What I'm suggesting you do is here, anchor some truth, be aware of the things that can happen that are unexpected, talk to them in a way that demonstrates that your company has the best years still in front of it, and that you are poised to react well to whatever happens here, both for the company and for your clients. Let me repeat that. Your company still has the best years in front of it. You're not a shooting star.
Okay, Mike, you brought up a lot of good things there. And in fact, you mentioned some things people aren't quite sure about: lead metrics, lag metrics. If you haven't read the book, 4 Disciplines of Execution, I highly recommend it. What a great book by McChesney Company and I apologize, the last one, 3 authors. But a similar book, and you mentioned hockey already, so let's stick in the hockey theme. There was a book about the hockey stick. Remind me which one this is. There's a strategy. Is it the strategy behind the hockey stick? Is that it?
Yeah, so it's from McKinsey Global Institute. And the name is called Strategy Beyond the Hockey Stick.
Okay, I know you read it. I've read it. So I think it's something that applies to there as far as management perspectives. So can you expand on that as well?
Sure. There's a few good things that we can pull out of here. I'm going to kind of bring them down into 2 bundles. Number 1, we have some things that you need to watch out for, and I think they'll probably surface right now in a more pronounced way than they might under normal circumstances. So we'll call these some of the cognitive bias elements that get in the way. First off, halo effect. So when you assign a positive result to your decisions, when there really was a strong enough tailwind that you should account for that contributed to the success, you're taking credit for what the market might have helped you do. Halo effect. Right now, the prescription for this is to humbly take a step back. And I'd go back through all the deals you closed over the last 3-4 years. You might do this with your door closed so that you can eat the humble pie. Was this me? Was this the market? Or was it a blend? It's probably a blend in most scenarios. How much of that pie was your skill? How much was tailwind or market lift? You need to have an accurate answer to that question so that you can move forward the right way. Number 2, anchoring. When you stick to a forecasted metric, and I'm going to give a highlight in just a second. When you stick to a forecasted metric due to the law of consistency in sales psychology, when you really should reevaluate and identify a new metric, you're in quicksand. You're not going anywhere fast. If all you care about right now is the number of outbound dials, you can make 500 calls a week and get nowhere. You could make programmatic calls leading to the right kind of discovery meeting and fill up a pipeline for 6 months from now. Obviously, one of those two scenarios is much better than the other. Don't get stuck in your anchors. Think about the quicksand analogy and be agile. Number 3, we've all heard of confirmation bias. So when you go on the hunt for evidence that backs up that your position is correct without weighing alternative possibilities, your eyes are closed to what you might be missing. The prescriptive element here is to ask yourself, okay, if I feel strongly about what our core performance platform is, what did I miss? If we got a deal done for XYZ reason, what did I miss? That's the question you want to ask yourself. Champion bias is next. This is where you might have a superstar on your team and you might think that the way they've always done things is the way that they're always going to do things. And I'd suggest that you might need to go back to that DISC assessment of that AVA and say, we need to look at how your normal pattern of communication is wired. And let's think about altering that a little bit, because the way you've always done things probably isn't going to be the best way to do things here in the short term, given this spike recession. Last two kind of bundled together, we have loss aversion and sunk cost fallacy. So there was an experiment that the McKinsey book talks about where they offered people with a flip of a coin. If it came up heads, they'd give them $100. If it came up tails, they'd lose some money. And they had to get to a ratio of 2-to-1 for people to accept the risk. We as humans are just wired to want to hoard, hence go to the store. And you can see some of this behavior right now in our consumer patterns if you go look for any household provisions. So if you think, how can you get out of loss aversion and sunk cost fallacy? Whatever you're emotionally stuck on that you can't logically defend, go back to your KPIs, and it's time to unwind that. Okay, so this is not the time to be bringing an emotional bias or cognitive bias to your team. I'm going to circle this back to how are you showing up. Make sure you're not making any of those 6 mistakes.
Okay, so a lot to unwrap there. I hope this is not a shameless plug, but Mike's been referring to this AVA quite a bit. If you're not sure what that is, just don't go now. Just write down CREperform, CREperform.com, and that will tell you more about the AVA and how to use it, how to apply it if you want to invest in your team for that. Okay, Mike. So again, fantastic leadership thought, but you're, well, I'm gonna pump you up here a little bit. You really are a sales manager, broker leader, gun for hire, and you're out there working with so many firms across North America, and with our clients, we're consulting brokerage firms as well with your tutelage and your leadership. So what would you say are how do I increase the odds of success within my brokerage firm as a leader? Are there parameters I should be looking at to increase those odds?
Sure, and I think we can put these in 3 buckets as well. So let's think of the answer here in terms of if you've got a piece of paper, just create 3 columns. Number 1, that's the endowment. What'd you begin with? Where was your starting line? You might create a new starting line today, looking forward. Number 2 is the trends. These are trade winds that you're sailing with. You're looking at a tailwind, a headwind, a crosswind, or none at all. But you're always going to have one of the 4. And you might have a mix. Let's pay attention to those because you need to adjust sales appropriately. Number 3, how do you execute? What are your moves? What do you do? What are your actions? So those 3 bundles would be your endowment, which you're starting with, the trends, everything happening around you that you're navigating with or against, and then your moves. What are you doing? What are your actions? So we have 3 things that are going to fall in the endowment pattern. One's the size of your company. You might think this is scaled up to if you're part of a institutional global brand, size of your company. You might think in terms of local market share. You could be the hegemon there, the size of your company. Debt level. By the way, with size of your company, please include all of your outsourced talent. You might offshore some research. You might hire interns. Think of every bit of work of your body of work that gets touched, size of your company. 2, in terms of trends, we've got industry trends, which these are the metrics that are pointing towards average growth in all companies in the industry. So over the last 5-6 years, we've been in a prolonged recovery in our 16.4 phase commercial real estate economic market cycle. And what that means is we've been riding the wave up to the crest. So some of that industry trend means most everybody's been riding that wave. Geographic trends to watch. Are you doing business in primary, secondary, tertiary markets, a blend, all sales, all leasing, all tenant rep, a combination, development, asset management, property management? Where and how are you doing business? Okay, so we've got endowment, we've got trends, and then the most important elements, and there's a few more of these, but these are the moves that you have made or that you are positioned to make moving forward. Number 1 is really programmatic M&A activity. So merger and acquisition activity. The key here that McKinsey talks about is do so intelligently and don't have any one move you make be large enough to capsize your boat. So if you're thinking,
Mike, let me stop you there because, it's amazing to me how many people have asked me in the last 3 weeks, email calls, I need to change my specialty, or those are individuals, and firms are acting the same way. Oh, cheese and crackers, you know what? I wish I had a property management firm now because I can get fees I can rely on. So can you expand a little more on that M&A and what people should be thinking?
yeah, so right now I think you have to be able to draw a direct correlation to how long is it going to take for you to actually drive some benefit, direct benefit to the client? And then how long is it going to take for that direct benefit to cascade down to your bottom line? If you were thinking about creating a whole new division and it was going to cost you a lot to put the infrastructure in place, and that money that you're going to invest right now means that you have to let talent go because you don't have the budget for both, I think that would be a mistake. So you need to look at this on a case-by-case basis, probably with your advisory board, your war council, as we mentioned earlier, so they can guide you through it. And if there's any kind of funding, equity component to it, right now, we're seeing all the interest rates ratchet up for any kind of secondary or M&A funding activity. It's just going to cost more to get it done. So think about bringing on partners. That can be a strategic conversation. I think if we're looking at time frame, Rod, it's a 10-year window, right? 2 ways. Is the decision I'm going to make going to help me get through the next 10 years? And am I still going to want that division in 10 years time? Because we're going to have a prolonged length of time to find some return.
Okay. Continue, Mike. I'm sorry about that. Continue.
Sure. So we have programmatic M&A activity. Next up is how dynamically are you allocating your resources? So where and how are you reinvesting in the business? Right now, I have some clients who are tripling down on the research to make sure that they have every client and future clients' contact information researched accurately so that they can send out the proper marketing, advertising, electronic touch, presence campaign and offer some things that are helpful. This is the kind of time to work on those kind of projects. Strong capital expenditure. You want to be monitoring here what you're spending your capital on versus your sales. Hopefully you've planned with some reserves and you're able to make it through a scenario where your reserves are going to help float your spending while your sales are down a little bit. Hopefully 2019 Q4 was strong, 2020 was strong because of a good pipeline machine in place. And those are Massimo principles. If they're not, then it might be time to look at moving those things in lockstep. And that's another conversation for your advisory board. Lastly here, strength of productivity. And I think this is where we get our top 100 client list out. We get our cumulative list of everybody we've ever done business with. And underline this, I think this is the most important part. Who did you propose and miss? Everybody that you've done business with and that you've proposed for, but it just didn't land or hasn't landed yet. I would look at every one of those potential business opportunities from a margin and an efficiency standpoint. How many dollars is it going to take you to earn that piece of business? And then once you have it, is that a possibility for repeat business? So if you get 3 transactions out of a client relationship from the marketing effort done one time, very efficient. If you spend 8 months gaining 1 client for a small fee and they're done and they don't transact again in any manner and they don't have any referral opportunities for you, that's an inefficient piece of business. So I think you want to go back and look at your margin metrics from a perspective of who is possible to take us through the next year, the next 3 years, right? How much margin can you get from every effort you make?
Well, Mike, we're at the halfway point. I'm going to tell everyone right now, there's no way in heck we'll get through all the material. It's overwhelming what we have for you today. So much so, I think, Mike, we're going to have to schedule a part 2 of this, but we're going to continue on as long as we can. But there's so much value you're sharing. And folks, again, you know, as I'll tell everybody, with Mike sharing his knowledge, which is nice, but it's worthless unless you do it, because knowing isn't doing. Don't forget that and continue to apply. So let's move forward in time we have. Now, you just mentioned a great conundrum. I have some cash, but I need sales. I have very less sales, but I need cash. So there's a balance going on and many facets of owning a brokerage firm and leading brokers. Can you talk about that balance, that either or, that both or and? I mean, help us out there.
Sure. So we've got 4 or 5 things here laid out that you probably want to, you got to look at these as a dichotomy, right? If it's all of one and none of the other, it's miscued. If it's all of the other and none of the one, equally as bad. So make sure that you're dividing priority equally between preparing your people, investing your time, right, on top of the demands of your clients. You need to be preparing your people with curriculum that advances their skills and grows them while balancing the demands of meeting the company's necessary results. So developing people and meeting the sales, which if you're a leader, player coach, you're probably going to slide into doing more of that work and generating more of the results than you had in the past. Just expect that moving forward. Number 2, you got to win some hearts and minds, but you have to keep these people accountable. Right? So responsibility and accountability are slightly different things. Accountability is what are we going to do? What are we committing to that will really matter? What are our must-dos moving forward? And you have to put those to some metrics. If it's 1 thing per week, or if it's 50 calls plus your other thing per week, that's for you to determine. Again, I wouldn't recommend too many, but you should probably have between 3 and 5 must-dos and then measure those things. We all want to go look at our spreadsheets and look at our indicators right now. I love those, right? Those feel like if I just stay in that worksheet long enough, I'll see the matrix. It doesn't happen that way. You need to have the right balance of find the information and then have a bias towards action. You got to get after it with your feet on fire. When it's time to go, it's time to go. So balance those two things. Getting clarity so that you can make a step with bias towards action, no analysis paralysis, which leads me to the next prescriptive element. Take small steps, small incremental steps. And this is how you work with your team. Take a small step, talk to your key leaders, your key captains in your organization, get feedback from them, communicate what the next step's going to be, and then take it. And then get more feedback, more information, and then take the next step. That should be a once a week process throughout this whole thing. You might have some difficult conversations to have with clients, maybe with yourself, maybe with your team. So staying constructive and in tune with the highest end of company culture in a stressful environment right now where people are probably behaving on the wacky end of their AVA analysis or their DISC profile. So you have to have those hard, crucial, difficult conversations. Maybe it's, Rod, you've been a little low on the key performance indicators here. We made an accountability commitment. I need you to hit those Monday. Tell me what I can do to help you. And you might have to give an educate statement on the front end with that or the back end of that to be able to say, hey, Rod, I'm feeling the same thing. I'm having some trouble. Here's something that's helped me so far, and we're going to roll this out for everybody. You're my guy. Why don't you help me lead this thing? Come on over here and let's do this together, right? Company culture and making sure you're staying accountability, having a difficult conversation. I think one of the ways you can do that, and this probably helps permeate this whole list of balancing the both and instead of the either or, is going to be lead up front with some vulnerabilities. Tell your team what you're struggling with. Be a human first and say, look, like you might see this really tough, this really focused, this really biased towards action exterior, but know that when I go home, I'm losing some sleep now too. I'm struggling with some things and I'm having to dive into my coach. I'm having to dive into some of my key people and get some reassurance here and there as well. So that's working for me. I think it can work for you too. All right. So leading with the vulnerabilities up front, but not going negative. Being vulnerable is one thing. It's human. Focusing on the negative is just going to derail all of your other productive activities.
I love it. I love it. So, Mike, let's get more tactical if we can. Okay. And I'm going to actually go off script. Mike and I had some questions that we were going to talk about, and I'm going to throw them. That's what he's not expecting here, because I think some of you are thinking this. Let's go back to the difficult conversations, Mike. So hopefully some of you out there, especially you brokerage owners, we're focusing on the brokerage owners. Some of you are asking questions about specific brokerage tactics individually. We're focusing on the brokerage ownership and leadership right now. But look, if you're not going out and getting an emergency loan, if you need it, it's there for you. If you're not getting PPP, if you need it, it's there for you. Yes, you need banking relationships. Yes, you need finance relationships, lending relationships, but all those are there for you. And that's changing every single day, it seems like. And we're keeping on top of this. But Mike, there are definitely some brokers out there on this call that we're going to have those hard conversations, whether you're going to have to furlough, for a nice word, furlough, or frankly, get rid of people, right? So any guidance in regards to that whole decision, that whole thought process, and even the conversation?
Yeah, that's the worst part of this whole thing. That's the toughest part. So if you have to have a conversation with somebody about maybe bringing their employment with you or their tenure with you to a conclusion, that has to come from a balance of the heart and the head. So I think if I were walking in to have that conversation this afternoon, I'd sit somebody down and say, what's the best version of yourself you want to be in 5 years, Rod? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And let's look at what critical steps you're going to have to take so that you can be there financially, you can be there as a person, you can be there as a husband, a father, a mother, a sister, whatever other roles that you play. And let's think with a really fine-tooth comb over the next 3 to 6 months. If you stay in this position right here, is that 3 to 6 months going to change the trajectory of your future success to the advantage, to the detriment, or keep you on par so that you can fight another day? And I'd open up the conversation with something like that, getting them future paced, thinking in the future, defining for themselves exactly what they want to do and where they want to be, and putting some real terms to it, pen in hand, defining this, creating some infrastructure around what that future self looks like. And then I'd walk them towards the fact that if it's time to terminate, I don't believe that the next year is going to be fruitful for them if they stay in this role, or that with company budgets as bad as it is, we have to take a break. If they're a really good person and there's not another seat on the bus for them from Jim Collins' good to great type of framework, maybe they can come back to it in a year. Yeah, I'd leave that conversation open. Maybe not. Maybe you introduce them to a few people. But I think I'd start with what's your best version of yourself.
Okay, and I know I'm throwing things at you, Mike, and and I love the input because you're a true leader. Actually, I'm in the middle of writing a white paper right now on what I would do if I was starting a company again, because I did in 2008. That's how I started the Massimo Group in the beginning of the Great Recession, where things were worse than they are right now from a financial perspective, not a health perspective, but financial perspective. But one thing I wrote in that white paper, and I know Mike, a different Mike asked this question. I said, great time to start recruiting great people. It really is. I know one of our clients after 9/11, and everyone was dropping off in New York and just absolutely purging their brokers. One brokerage firm said, great, we'll hire them all. We'll hire all the great people and we'll grow the firm. That firm became the dominant firm in the market for the next 15 years. And that may be one of the pivot points for that. So Mike, what do you think about now going out and actually the opposite versus furloughing, growing? Is now the right time? And if so, what would that conversation look like maybe with someone who just got laid off?
Laid off from another place, a competitor, another firm, and I'm looking to go bring them on board to mine?
Yeah.
I'd know what they closed, and I'd know the story about how they conduct business. So I'd probably start that with something like, Rod, I've been watching your work. I like it, and I have a lot of respect for the way that you've created some success over the last few years. That being said, I'm assuming that I know that the person is no longer with the former company. I think that our company culture and your practices of developing business and the way you treat your clients are pretty close to alignment. There might be some more things to figure out, but what's going to be the most important when you decide who you want to do business with and how and where you want to do business coming out of this thing? And then however they respond, I would note what we have in common and invite them to the Zoom room for some coffee or whatever we need to do here and start the conversation. I
love it. And I love the fact, and folks, this is why I love working with Mike. You could take him off script and he's still just as sharp and such as accurate and so smart. So Mike, thanks so much for that. Let's get back to some more granular stuff. So taking all this into consideration, a lot of approaches out there, and we're going to make sure we leave with some key thoughts as far as, I want to know what you all as an audience are going to take away. Someone just wrote, don't let one division sink your entire company, which is so true. But are there any bullet points you can say right now as far as how you start this whole process with your team?
Yeah. So right out of the gate, my style is usually I want to come out swinging and I want to get out in front of things. So really quickly, are we going to be good? Are we going to be average? Are we going to be elite? There's different set of work. There's different approach to the work to arrive at good, average, and elite. And I think that as a group, you probably want to sit down however you can and define what that means. It might be a new definition. 2020, the first half of 2021 might not be margins that you've been making. It might not be large pieces of business that you've been closing, because the institutional players right now are probably going to take a wait and see approach. You might need to completely redefine that. So right up front, all right, guys and girls, we're going to get through this together. Are we going to work on business we've typically defined as good, average, or elite, and how are we going to get it done? So I think that'd be the first thing. I'd go back to and I'd revisit that. Who are we in 5 years? Who are we in 3? Who are we in summer of 2021? And let's make our metrics defined from that question, which can probably bring up the real estate and the real life. Like, who are we going to be on the real estate side of this equation, and who are we going to be on the real life? Because we can develop the whole person here. I wouldn't want to be comparing ourselves to others. I'd want to be comparing ourselves to ourselves with a really clear understanding of who were we yesterday, and are we a little bit better today than we were yesterday? And then I'd want to clearly define what are our priorities to get better tomorrow and next month and next quarter, so that I can then execute those and say, in order of priority, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to be a machine. We're going to get these things done, and that defines good. And we're going to have a couple things that define elite. You bet you know what, we're going after those too. Here we go. So I think that's how I would go about some granular approaches towards starting that conversation. I'd remind everybody that in our business, this is not a game of quantum leaps. Right? This is good old-fashioned self-discipline and just an iron will that you apply every day. And I'd ask everybody, hey, guys, what are the things you're most interested in that that'll cause us to energize the work? Do that.
Okay, so Mike, I know we have so much content to provide, so I'm going to jump around a little bit. Let's talk about leadership right now. Should I be micromanaging, or should I be let the kids play, total autonomy, they're home anyway? What the heck can I do? What should I do as a brokerage leader?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. If you're on my teams, you've heard me say earned autonomy before. Earned autonomy is, we start with a baseline of trust, we build that, and as I see, and as the company sees that the broker's doing the right things, they get a lot more leash, right? So we might start and incubate somebody with, here's what it takes to get started in the business, here's what it takes to be a mid-level career, someone 3 to 5 years in, and if you're post 5 years, you need less. You've already earned a lot of that autonomy. So I think I would say, how are you going to earn autonomy from your own checklist? And then I'm a resource to help you do that, rather than me being the person that has to come in and hover. And this is not the time to play heavy hand, but I'd assign their goals. I'd assign what they want to accomplish. Rod, I've seen your business plan. I've seen the mechanics of how you're going to orchestrate it. I know what you're doing, where you're investing in yourself to get better and improve your skill sets. If you were to take those and make this third-party accountability factor, what are you going to do to stay accountable to that third party? And I'd almost make it like it's another person, it's another thing, and then I'm at their right hand so that we can go there together. And I think that would give me a big deposit. We're going to talk about relationship capital here as my next piece. I think you really want to be paying attention to how many withdrawals and how many deposits you make. We can't be going to our team constantly asking for, I need accountability withdrawal, right? Because it's like a bank account. You put a little deposit in and you can take a little bit out in the future. If all you do is prune the money tree here, they have nothing left to give you. And at that point in time, the trust and the confidence of your team has eroded, and you're going to see people leave, or you're going to see them self-implode. Both of those that's on the leader, that's on you. So here's how we stay ahead of that, how we avoid it. If you're going to ask for something, I'd suggest that you probably have given them deposit in advance. Hey, here's something that I found. This is really helpful. This might work for you. Okay, if it is going to work for you, how are you going to keep track of it? What are you going to do for yourself? And then another deposit. Hey, by the way, you know I'm here to help. I can get you there too. You got to do the work, but I can help you strategize. You can't outsource the push-ups, Rod. You got to do them, but I'll help. I'll do them with you, and I'll help you count them.
Damn, I was hoping I could outsource those push-ups, Mike. So now I'm bummed.
Everybody wants to.
Okay, we got some time left, so I'm gonna get back to some key questions. I think when I'm looking at this agenda, are there any? Well, let's go. I don't. People use this term: silver bullets, secret ingredients, X factors. I don't know what you call them, but any idea? You've done this so often with running brokerage firms. Any silver bullet? I don't believe in silver bullets, but are there any certain X factors we should be considering?
Sure. So, we look at a lot of the really high performing teams, and I'm thinking here to like Brendan Burchard's high performance habits, looking at the selection process for special ops teams or for NCAA collegiate athletics or professional athletics. Here's some things that seem to transcend all of those high performance environments. Number one, external motivation, whether it be greed or whatever, is just not a substitute for somebody who's got internal discipline and a mindset that is geared towards action. So I think if you're looking in your people right now and yourself, you want to see internal discipline and the right mindset, internal focus, locus of control, so that those people see, oh, you know what? If I just work harder and smarter, I know I'm going to find the angle. The external motivation then commonly tends to turn around and point towards external factors for why they couldn't succeed. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Number two is that a lot of high performers carry a common correlation where at some point in time or in some way in their life, they were marginalized. They were pushed to the periphery. There was something that they really, really wanted, and it just didn't happen. Athletes commonly have injuries that prevent them from moving on to the next phase of being a collegiate athlete or being a pro athlete. Something like that can be a fuel source for that fire that drives them to pursue success in another vertical of life. Sometimes that can be their career. So if there's some marginalization in there somewhere, or if they've been impacted by something out of their control, I'd look to that. That tends to be a factor for a high performer. I'd want to make sure that you're shrinking the distance between today's work and the result so that everybody on your team notices that the things they control today are going to lead to outcomes that are measurable and productive and going down the right path tomorrow. Brokerage, we talked about this on our last call. It's challenging where the work we do today often leads to paychecks could be several months or years down the road. Hard to feel like that's a visible outcome. So as leaders, as managers, mentors, coaches, trainers, we got to shrink that distance and say, you know what, there's a big step Y and Z, but step A is going to lead to step B. Let's focus on B. And then a couple last points on this. Expect that everybody's going to rely on their talents and strengths to carry them through. They're going to shirk the hard work. The really gifted athlete who doesn't want to go to practice, the really gifted student who doesn't want to do the homework. Just think about some examples like that. Keep everybody accountable to each other. Do this as a team and avoid in yourself having too much intensity come out, right? Says the guy who probably shows up more intense than a lot of people do a lot of times. So I get that. But that personality trait, that lead from the front characteristic can easily, it's like fire, right? It can cook your steak, it can keep your house warm, but it can also burn the house down if it's too much. So you got to keep that in the middle. You can't let your intensity be way too low, and you can't let it be way too high. And I think those are some X factors that you can take right away and put into application.
Great, Michael. I'm going to take some of these questions and I'm going to let you close out with some statements, and then I'll come back to close out with some thoughts. So Derek and Dallas, you asked, how do I guide our brokers who are just starting out their careers? They don't have a pipeline to sustain themselves. Derek, I woke up 2 weeks ago and I realized I had changed everything in the company because what was working 2 weeks ago isn't going to work anymore. And that's true with your new business brokers. So we created completely new program. And my team said, was this for new to business or is this for mid-career? And I looked at them all and said, everyone is new to business today. Everyone, I don't care how much experience you think you have, has to rethink what they're doing. They have to pivot. So if they don't, if you think you can be doing the same thing you did before March and grow and or survive, isn't going to happen. It just isn't. Reflect back to the Great Recession. Over half the brokers were out of work in little as 12 months. It just happens. So Derek, I'm telling you, don't treat them differently than you treat everyone else. Everyone needs the same process that you're doing right now. Your mid-careers, I apply to new to business as far as that's concerned. So that's one thing. If you have some questions, please ask them. People, again, we're not going to address your personal questions. How about this market? You're into that. No, this is about leading a team. So let me give you some, well, Mike, before I give him some parting thoughts, why don't you give some, and what we're going to do is either we're going to have a very soon, very quick turnaround and have a second part 2 of this because there's so much more content and ideas for you leading your teams. So that's very likely. Next week, we have an amazing guest, Lieutenant Colonel Waldo Waldman, Afghan fighter pilot. He's going to talk about how we deal with stress and how we then change that to be more productive. So don't forget that one next week. But Mike, any final thoughts, any takeaways before we wrap this one up before the next one?
Yeah, we have like 5 hours worth. Where would you like me to start? I'm going to try to reach in the goodie bag here and just grab a couple things that bubble to the surface, probably a little bit more philosophically, and then something firm to close out on. So another key term, right? The culture is going to start with you. The leader is going to create the culture, and whatever you create in terms of culture is going to drive the behavior that your team is doing and that you hold yourself accountable to. And that behavior is going to generate the results that your company either produces or doesn't. So in this manner here, I know there's only so many ways you can slice up and dice up a real estate deal, but we need to either find a way or we need to make one. We can't allow from the top our people and our teams to see that we're out of solutions or that we're out of ideas. So I think for a key takeaway, have your intellectual curiosity hat on here. Every day, look to find some little wrinkle that you can do a little bit differently, okay? And remember, leader leads culture, culture leads behavior, behavior is going to generate your results. In terms of pushing your people, whatever level of trust and respect that you've built up as of April 9th, that's how far you can push. You can't expect people to be at year 3 with you, level of respect and friendship and professional courtesy, if they're in month 2 with your organization, or if you're with month 2 of their organization. You have to right size that and move that forward in lockstep with you being the first step. So remember, as a key takeaway, deposits, withdrawals, deposits. Put more in that bank than you take out. And then I'll go here for a firm takeaway. Go find the productive discomfort. Go find that level of training that if it's the push-ups, it's 2 more than they could do yesterday. Not 100 more than they could do yesterday, but 2. So that today's goals are whatever the goal is plus 1. I think if you push people and you set the pace that way, that's the cadence that's going to get a little bit more done. And it's those extra repetitions that will be extremely fruitful. So taking everything that we have prepared and kind of bringing them to a conclusion point, I think there are several more conversations that we could generate here, especially on the heels of fighter pilot next week. We might be talking about the OODA loop and using that to balance stress. If there's more demand for more of these conversations, let Rod know. We'll continue to serve that need as long as it's here.
Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for your leadership and your tutelage and how you're helping so many folks get through these unprecedented times from a health standpoint, but certainly repeated times from a market downturn standpoint. So Mike, thank you so much for your time. Everyone else, I forgot, I failed to ask you a question as you joined us. And so I want you to always think about that because there's no doubt you have so many webinars you're going into now. And here's the question you need to ask. Instead of just listening to Mike, listening to me, the question you need to ask is, what am I listening for? So I would share with you your time is your greatest asset right now. So what are you listening for going forward? Every webinar, ask yourself, what am I listening for? And from that, ask those questions. I'm looking for this specifically so we can help you more. Also, for those who want more help, I will share with you that Mike and I run a firm called CRE Boss. That's CRE Boss. You can Google it. We help individual brokerage owners and managers as far as sales management, leadership, and the like. We are probably going to start within a matter of days, if not weeks, a brokerage leader mastermind group. So if you're a brokerage leader with, let's say, 5 or more individuals that you lead and are interested in talking to other brokerage leaders in a more formal structure, we'll tell you about that as well. That'll be in non-competitive markets, absolutely. And I saw we had many, many individuals on this call. Just check us out at massimo-group.com. We have new programs we've just developed just in the last 2 weeks to help you not only survive this downturn, but come out on top today and at the end. So we'll get another session to you in the next few days. We'll let you know where we're going. We'll get an email later today or tonight, telling you exactly where this is going to be. Yes, we are recording it, and we will post that and tell you where that's going to be posted as well, probably by tonight, if not tomorrow. God bless. Thank you, everyone. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.